Welcome to the Volunteer Management Course from WVA. This is a shortened version of a longer course. If you'd like more information on volunteer management or anything we discuss in this video, please get in touch and we can provide bespoke support for your organisation. This course attempts to track the journey of a volunteer from setting up your programme, recruiting, managing and dealing with everyday processes. We will start by looking at the bigger picture of volunteering and how it is viewed within legislation and what governs volunteering. Through the session, we will also look at some logistic considerations, how to manage and motivate volunteers, all with the sentiment of trying to give your volunteers the best support and to help your organisation achieve its mission. In this section, we'll look at how volunteering is viewed from a legal and policy perspective. We're going to start with the definition. The key points from this are the elements of freely offering support. We believe that volunteering is about choice, and the volunteer controls what time they give and what they do when they give it. Another key point is that volunteers aren't being paid. This can sometimes cause confusion, suspicion, and clashes within organisations that utilise paid staff and volunteers. This points out that a clear line between the two roles is incredibly important. A thing that often surprises people is the lack of legislation that exists around volunteering. If we break it down and investigate it further, it becomes clear that it's such a complex, diverse world that it makes it hard to create any fixed rules that will cover every eventuality. When thinking about your organisation, the rules and guidelines that you create are specific to you and your setup and dependent on the circumstances you operate under. There is often local guidance or attitudes to be inspired by too. Warrington has a volunteering strategy that encourages barrier-free access to excellent opportunities and that volunteering is positively promoted within the town. You can read the strategy on the WVA website. You can also be directed by the local challenges and priorities of the community. Warrington has a range of strategies and programmes going on that organisations can be a part of. Get in touch with the WVA team if you are interested in finding out more. We now move to think about how you communicate and manage the internal rules and guidelines. These thoughts are based on best practice, which has been gathered over many years, and the collective learning from a range of practitioners and organisations. The key to a strong policy is making it bespoke and fitting it to your programme and the mission of your organisation. Templates are a great place to start and are available from WVA, but many additions may be necessary depending on how you operate. You can policy anything that feels relevant because it has an impact on the day-to-day operation of your programme. You might even need a section on tea bags. There is guidance on the resource section of the WVA website and you can ask the team for bespoke support or a read-through of your policy. Consider the language you are using and keep it simple. The more complicated the words and terminology you use are, the more open to misinterpretation it is. Use plain and simple language in your policies which clearly states your intention. There are options for how your policy fits into your suite of paperwork. It can either be a standalone document that covers every element of your programme and acts as a joint handbook/policy. This means that everyone involved, volunteers, staff and trustees, can find the guidance they all need in one place. Alternatively, it can be part of a wider scheme and refer to other policies which are all standalone. You might have a separate expenses policy, some health and safety guidance, and a quality statement and an environmental pledge that all aligns with your volunteering policy and all act together as one big reference library. Your policies must be owned and used. This means that you refer to them and that they are fit for purpose. When you reach some difficulties, the policy should be the first port of call and it should be revisited after you have dealt with something. Therefore, they need to be easily accessed and are treated as working documents ready to be amended as and when your programme develops. This is important, especially if you are using a joint policy and handbook, as this culture document contains all the keys to the programme being the best it can be. This section features some thoughts on recruitment. WVA offer bespoke support on recruitment where we can help you at every stage of the journey. As we start to think about recruitment, it is a useful time to consider what role a person will play in the organisation. There are two ways we see people getting involved with organisations, and it depends on the individual as to which is most suitable. The first, which you will recognise, is volunteering. Volunteering is about taking a position of responsibility in the organisation and furthering its cause. This could be supporting or delivering an activity or service, and it can also be through running the organisation or being part of a committee or trustee board. The other side, which is probably less discussed, is participation. Some people think that they want to volunteer, but for whatever reason don't want to or may struggle to take responsibility for a full role. These people are the ideal participants. Participation is taking part in the activities, but doing so to encourage others to get the most out of it, so they are acting as a role model. If you would like to know more about this, you can watch our video about volunteering and participation. This section is about advertising volunteering and some tips from our team about getting the message across. You probably live and breathe your group or organisation and know it inside out, and it's quite easy to forget that other people have no idea who you are. It's also good to know that not everyone understands the jargon and language we use within community organisations, so you may have to alter it to be more open and get your point across to people who have no idea what you're talking about but want to help. When you come to pull your advert together, have someone proofread it, like the WVA team, and then get them to tell you what they think you are looking for and what the role is that you are looking to fulfil. The most successful adverts are those that allow the volunteer to imagine themselves doing that role because they understand the cause and the tasks and see how they could fit in. Think about painting a picture with words about your opportunity. Of course, it doesn't have to be through words alone. You could also make a short video talking about the opportunity and post it on social media. What we want and what we need are often different, and the things we would like aren't always feasible. Think about your ask and if it's achievable. Does the person you are looking for even exist? Are you seeking perfection that just isn't there? Sometimes it can be hard for recruiters who have devoted all of their time and energy to the cause and are willing to give long hours, attention and resources to the cause to see what other people don't want to do or can't do. If you are looking for another you, be realistic and think about the odds of finding someone that fits that criteria. The other side of realism is about the role. Is it asking for people to save the world or eradicate a social problem that is bigger than all of us combined? By all means set a challenge, but make it a challenge that people can do. If you know what kind of people you want, think about where you might find them. Targeted advertising to a specific group is successful because you have gone right to who you want and they feel invited and connected to the cause. People who are directly asked are more likely to volunteer. An opportunity that is a small, achievable goal is usually much more attractive to a potential volunteer than a mammoth task they know won't ever be met. Think about what other things make the role desirable. Is it what a volunteer might get out of their time, the things they can move on to, the strong sense that they have made a difference, the time that they can spend with other people? Try and avoid making big promises that you can't guarantee, as it doesn't help either party. Steer away from statements like, "This will help you build confidence," or "You will make friends," as you can't be sure that either will happen. If you are struggling to think of ways to explain the role or the benefits to the volunteer, talk to us and we will help you. The feedback we often get from volunteers is how it would be useful to have a realistic understanding and expectation of what will happen once they have replied to the advert. The clearer you can be about what's going to happen, the higher number of responses as you get people who are happy with taking part in the process. One thing to remember is that there is a difference between an inquiry for more information and an application. The vast majority of first contact is seeking further information, and it's important to have that information at hand to send to them. Create a document or direct them to your website that explains more about the organisation, the role, and how to apply. Volunteers that get this information are far more likely to apply. Once you have them interested and looking to apply, we turn our attention to the screening process and ensure that they are the right person for the organisation. Many organisations have application forms, but report that they hand many out but get few returned. Consider why this might be, and actually, do you need a form? It could be that you have always had an application form, and you do them out of habit. Look at your ratio of those you have handed out and those you get back and see if you feel it's worth it. If you are going to have a form, take a look at the questions and see if they are all relevant. As you do this, think about the way people answer these questions and if their answers are useful. We are taught that it's good practice to put on the application form what you think the organisation wants to hear. So actually, are you finding anything out about them this way anyway? This is a good time to reflect on the skill set that you need and then tailor the recruitment process to those skills. If you need telephone befrienders, it makes little sense to do everything by email. You don't need to know about their email skills, you need to know if they come across well on the phone. If you need people, then face-to-face meetings are much more logical. Another good reason for going with face-to-face recruitment is that you will know instinctively that that person is suitable for the role or not. It's easy to get someone to fill out your form for you, but not that possible for someone to speak for you in real life. This is also a good way to split the volunteers from the participants. When you are gathering information about people, either through an application form or from an informal interview for their volunteer record, you need to think about why you are gathering the information you are documenting. Do you need their full postcode, or would the first 3 digits do? Do you need the house number or just the street, the day or just the month and year of their birth, or do you just need to know that they are over 18? If they don't have or want an emergency contact, do you have permission from them for you to not call anyone? If you are going to ask people on forms to document work history or medical challenges, think about how much identifiable information you are gathering, and is this useful or necessary? Try and keep information to a minimum. Now we have got the volunteers selected and part of the group, we now need to manage them and keep them connected and motivated. Most organisations have some sort of hierarchy. After all, someone has to be in charge. An important part of a volunteer's feeling valued is about the respect and acknowledgement they get within the group. They're not being paid financially, but they are paid with gratitude and respect. Think about where they are viewed within the organisation. Are they the lowest level, or are they at the same level as your paid staff or lead volunteers? Part of the communication that you have with the volunteers, that lots of people don't even think about, is the way that they are described and the attitudes you have towards them. Phrases like just a volunteer or oh, we'll leave that for the volunteers put volunteers in a position where they feel they aren't important, skilled or respected. On the flip side, are you putting unnecessary pressure by constantly calling them amazing or fantastic? Many volunteers are humble and don't want praise externally. It can be a careful juggling act. When you take on volunteers, think about what kind of care you can offer them. Often volunteers will come to you with their problems and challenges from both inside and outside the organisation. The more volunteers, the more challenges you are facing. Do you have the capacity, skills and time to deal with all of that? And what support do you get from your organisation to do it? Is it worth thinking about what your volunteers are being asked to do, or what needs your volunteers may have, and if you need to put some measurements in place for their well-being, and if you have a system for pastoral care in place? Finding volunteers can be tricky, and finding volunteers that exactly fit your requirements can be even more challenging. You are probably going to have to adopt some level of flexibility, either in the times and regularity of attendance or the tasks that they perform. This can be a challenge for volunteer managers as it can create extra work or extra drama, but it's part of the role to create a flexible arrangement with volunteers. Part of reducing problems and challenges in the long term is getting the foundations right in a strong induction and having consistent support through a line manager or mentor. Things you might want to include in an induction: introduction to the organisation and your mission, health and safety considerations, basic safeguarding, negotiations on roles or tasks, introduction to line managers, mentors and any task-specific training. All of this should be heavily influenced by the group's ethos and mission. This section focuses on how to provide targeted, bespoke support to volunteers. It is useful to know what attracted the volunteer to your group, as this can be used to remind them if they have a time where they are struggling to stay connected or motivated. It can also form part of your recruitment messages if multiple volunteers report the same hook to the organisation. Sometimes what attracted them isn't what keeps them around, and understanding the driver is helpful for similar reasons as the attraction, but the driver can also be helpful for funding bids too. Setting boundaries is important to keep everyone safe and to make sure that the group's mission is being met ethically and effectively. They are based on managing and having clear and realistic expectations. Think about what is an achievable expectation for you to have of your volunteers. Staying in touch, keeping promises, and staying within the boundaries are all logical expectations. Ask yourself if devoting all of your free time, going way over and above the role, and taking part in risky behaviour are suitable demands or expectations. On the flip side, think about what is reasonable for them to expect of you. Communication, support, flexibility are all things that you can give volunteers to keep them feeling connected and valued. Consider how you are going to set and communicate the boundaries. Part of this involves the consequences and potential steps you will take if someone breaks those boundaries. Aside from the basic logistic information that you might gather, you are likely to keep further records about the volunteer and about their training or talents. It is good practice to have a catch-up periodically with your volunteers where you can discuss their daily or soft skills, technical abilities, what's going well and what needs work. Because volunteers spend a lot of time down on the ground, they are often the best people to know what's happening in the organisation, so asking them what's new is often a good way of seeing what's going on. In the same way that people learn in different ways, people need to be informed in different ways. Think about how you share important messages and if you might need to write down or say it out loud, or both. A lot of challenges that volunteers can have is because they have missed vital information or updates. A question the WVA team is consistently asked is about good practice around expenses, so here are some points. You don't have to offer them. If you can, it's good practice to offer them, but if you can't, be very clear from the recruitment stage as it might affect a volunteer's ability to participate if they can't get to the venue. Provide clear information on what you are offering. Make sure the volunteers know how much you are giving them. For mileage, you can choose to pay the HMRC amount for staff, which is 45p, or a figure of your choosing. What it will be for, often the cheapest form of transport for the town or an agreed mode of transport, and what evidence you need. For example, bus tickets, receipts or a mileage form. It is also important to let them know what you will cover. Is it travel to and from the venue or just for the travel they did during their shift? Ensure that any volunteers that receive any state benefits inform their advisor and make sure that any expenses collected don't affect their benefit award. Create a system and stick to it. Be consistent with all volunteers and make sure that you collect all of the evidence and be strict with a no evidence, no expenses policy. Remember, you are dealing with donor or public money and you have to be accountable for every penny. It can also be easy for people to accuse you of acting unscrupulously if your system is inconsistent and money doesn't have a clear paper trail. If you are creating bids for your programme or project and expenses are a vital part of that, consider putting it in your budget. Use your targeted number of volunteers and work out their average claim. This could make attracting and deploying volunteers easier for your project. Not everything within your programme is going to go right, and sometimes you might need to engage some sort of protocol to manage challenging behaviour or deal with a serious issue that a volunteer might have. Because the traditional terminology of grievance or disciplinary can be harsher or more dramatic than it needs to be, we can reframe both of these into a more flexible and sensitive problem-solving procedure. The reason for this is so that we have a system that takes into account the diversity of volunteers, their experience and ability, coupled with the fact that they are not obliged or incentivised to be there. One of the other benefits of this system is that it can work from both parties. You can discuss challenges you might be having with a volunteer, or they can raise issues or concerns with you. Both operate under the same process. This procedure uses the same stages as a traditional document, but adds in some informal stages, which creates the additional flexibility and means that there are multiple challenges which can be running simultaneously. Traditionally, there would be a formal verbal warning, a formal written, and then a dismissal. This adds in an informal verbal warning, an informal written warning, sandwiched between the stages to allow for an official warning without the severity. Often all it takes is an informal chat with a volunteer and highlighting the challenge, and that is enough to reduce the challenge itself. Depending on the severity of the action and the setting you are in, you are able to skip stages, and it is useful to consider what actions would be serious or heinous enough to deserve to be skipped or go straight to dismissal. A link to more information on the problem solving section can be found on the resources section of the WVA website. We're going to close this session with some key points. Explore if volunteering is embedded in your organisation's ethos. This means that everyone involved is bought into involving volunteers from the board committee to the full team. Be aware of the legal aspects and check if unsure. Make sure you know exactly what is within the rules, and if there are no rules, create strong ones that suit your programme and work within best practice. Tailor your policies and documentation to what your programme is and not what it should be. Sometimes we can lose sight of the reality because of our desire for it to be something that it will never be. This also goes for volunteers. Attract what you need before what you want, and be realistic. For a more fulfilling experience for the volunteers and to make things easier for you in the long run, consider the possible motivations of the volunteer and on a day-to-day basis, manage in a way tailored to the volunteer. If you have any further questions about anything raised in this film or want bespoke support with your programme, you can always ask the WVA team anything big or small. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.